Hey you guys, what's going on? My name is Reed the Rider. I want to talk a little bit about Juneteenth. So Juneteenth passed about 1 day ago, actually 2 days ago, because today is Friday. And I had a lot of people on my job ask us questions about what Juneteenth was. A lot of people still don't know what Juneteenth is. And I think it's always important to remember why we celebrate certain holidays, and we have recognition for those members of our past who lived and survived. And we always make sure that we continue telling their stories to the new generation and to people who may not be aware of like the tragedies of slavery and Black people's struggles and Jim Crow and those certain type of topics. I think it's always important just to have those reminders, and for that reason is like so we do not repeat history. So what I'm doing today, and this actually worked out perfectly, because there was a video. His name is Reggie Jackson. He's actually a famous, very famous baseball player. Reggie Jackson is, how old is he? He's 78 years old. He was on ESPN this morning and last night. He was trending yesterday from what he said, but it started trending more today. News anchors asked Reggie Jackson about his experience playing pro ball back in the like when did he play? He played during like the 1960s. Yeah, he played from let me see right here. I want to make sure I have the right dates. But yeah, the dates he joined was like 1982, 1977, 1976. So basically he was playing professional baseball back in the 70s. But what he did is he informed the news anchors, the journalists there, about his experiences playing professional baseball back in the 70s and what he endured back then. And I think it's so important that we have like those topics, because like I said, we don't want to repeat history. We want to remember where we came from, so that way we can prevent those tragedies. We can prevent people being treated in such a manner to this day, especially for the new generation like my age and younger. And I want to give all the shout and all the love to Reggie Jackson, because I can only imagine growing up in an environment, especially during the South, during the 60s and the 70s and 80s and 90s, what Black people felt and experienced in this country. And I've heard horror stories from my own grandfather, and my father told me about what my family members went through growing up in like Covington, Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee, and those experiences of being Black service members, Black Army men, and coming back to this country to be harassed and belittled by police officers and people in the town, and not being able to sit in the front of the bus and being forced to sit in the back, and having to drink from colored water, and not being allowed to drink freely wherever you needed to drink. So those experiences, we need to talk about it. But yeah, so Reggie Jackson, I'm gonna show you guys a video too of him talking to the newscasters. But yeah, I just want to give a little praise to Reggie Jackson. He was born in 1946, so he's 78 years old. He was raised in Township, and he played for the New York Yankees, for the Oakland, for Baltimore, for the Los Angeles Angels. Yeah, but he started playing back in like the 1960s, 1967. And he last ended playing baseball, which was in 1982 for the Los Angeles Angels. But yeah, his testimony, his story, it really did. It did a number to me. So I want to show that to you guys so you guys can listen and hear about it. So I'm going to play it right now. I'm going to put it on the screen right here so you guys can hear it. Okay, so I'm going to do it right now.
How emotional is it for you to come back to a play that you played with one of the greatest teams around?
Alex, when people ask me a question like that, it's like coming back here is not easy. The racism that I played here, when I played here, the difficulty of going through different places where we traveled. Fortunately, I had a manager and I had players on the team that helped me get through it. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody. People said to me today, I spoke, and they said, you think you're a better person, you think you won when you played here in Concord. I said, I would never want to do it again. I walked into restaurants and they would point at me and said, the nigger can't eat here. I would go to a hotel and they say, the nigger can't stay here. We went to Charlie Finley's country club for a welcome home dinner, and they pointed me out with the N-word. He can't come in here. Finley marched the whole team out. Finally, they let me in there. He said, we're going to go to the diner and eat hamburgers. We'll go where we're wanted. Fortunately, I had a manager and Johnny McNamara that if I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat. We'd get food to travel. If I couldn't stay in a hotel, they'd drive to the next hotel and find a place where I could stay. Had it not been for Raleigh Fingers, Johnny McNamara, Dave Duncan, Joe and Sharon Rudy, I slept on their couch 3-4 nights a week for about a month and a half. Finally, they were threatened that they would burn our apartment complex down unless I got out. I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Oh my gosh, my heart goes out to him. Because you could tell just from him describing his experience. And this wasn't like 100 years ago, or this wasn't so far ago that, the people who experienced segregation and racism can't remember it, or it's something that we don't need to discuss because, slavery happened and we've forgotten about it. No. Racism, from what this man was just, explaining his story, happened not that long ago. And I want you guys to think about this. Think about Jim Crow. That wasn't that long ago. There are people, especially some of the white people who were in the background. I believe there was a TikToker who did that. He actually investigated and looked up all the people who were in the, I can't remember the name, it was a little girl too. It's going to kill me. But young little girl who went to that school in Alabama. No, Michigan. It was in Michigan. It was Little Rock. There we go. And he looked up all the white people in the background and some of the children and some of those pictures on the newspapers and that most historic famous picture. And a lot of those white people were still alive. And I know Oprah did the same thing. She brought out some of those children from the Little Rock. And a lot of those children were grown. This was like the Oprah show back in the 90s. Those children were only in their late 40s, some 50s, maybe some 60s, in just their age range. So a lot of those white people who were racist, very evil people, were still alive. It's something for the Emmett Till thing. The woman who lied about Emmett Till, the woman who said that Emmett Till whistled at her, or did something. I believe it was whistled. Those people are still alive. And I want you guys to always remember that. Those things did not happen so long ago that we don't need to discuss it. It actually happened recently. We're still within the same decade. This man is only 78 years old. He was born in 1946. It hasn't even been 100 years. And when he was in his prime, this was back in the 60s, you guys. The 60s is when this man started playing. In the late 60s, not even the early 60s. He was called the N-word, walking into restaurants, walking into hotels, establishments. The last story he shared was they were willing to burn down a hotel to get this man out of here, as if he had some sort of disease or contagion, as if there was something wrong with him because he had a darker complexion and because he was black. It was so much of an issue for him to exist in a building that the owners would rather the building be burned down than him sleep and rest his head in there. And this is why we have to talk about these things, and why we need to always have remembrance for Juneteenth and for slavery. And we need to bring up these things, and especially children. Children need to hear about these stories. So what I'm going to do with you guys is I'm going to read to you guys a short, little synopsis of the history and the legacy of Juneteenth and why it is we celebrate it. So, just in case, you ever in the future, you come back and be like, what is Juneteenth? You can remember Reggie Jackson's story, and you can remember me explaining to you guys what it actually means and why it is we celebrate it, and why I still believe that, all businesses in America should be closed during Juneteenth. I have no idea why. I do know it is a holiday, but why it is stores are still open and why people continue to their work, I don't understand that. But regardless. So what is Juneteenth? I'm going to read to you guys this article. It goes, on Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch night services took place. On that night, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes all across the country, awaiting news that Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered as all enslaved people in Confederate states, and Confederate states are just, primarily those were states down south, and those were states that wanted to keep African Americans enslaved. And those states primarily used African Americans to work at cotton gins, and we were growing all types of stuff, but we were working primarily in cotton, sugar, tobacco, those type of products, farming. We were builders, construction, all types of things, leather, making clothing, all types of stuff. Let me keep going. And it goes, Confederate states were declared legally free. So that basically means that those Confederate states, had to release African American slaves. It was time they had to be let go and let free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched into plantations, and this is true, and across the cities in the South, reading small copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, spreading the news of freedom in Confederate states. So that's what happened. And those soldiers, they marched around to plantations and they spread the news, because a lot of the slaves could not read. A lot of African American slaves, we could not read. We weren't allowed to read. And for a lot of us who actually were able to read or found out to be read, were killed. That's how bad plantations were. And only through the 13th Amendment did emancipation end slavery throughout the United States. But not everyone in Confederate territory would immediately be free. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it could not be implemented in places still under Confederate control. As a result, in the westernmost Confederate states, which is Texas, enslaved people would not be free until much later. Freedom finally came on June 19th, and that's why we celebrate on the 19th of June in 1865. And keep in mind, it ended, the Freedom's Eve happened on January 1st in 1863. So when the last slaves were actually freed, when we were all freed in Texas, it took 2 years after the proclamation was signed and put into effect. So Texas hid that from African American slaves for 2 extra years of indentured servitude, enslavement. And when some 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, the Army announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. So those slave owners in Texas knew that those black people were free and did not care. And it wasn't until 2,000 Union troops, that's basically a whole army, had to go into Galveston Bay and force them to release those African American slaves. You guys understand that 2,000 men had to go down there and force these slave owners to let us free. The army announced that the more than 25 people were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. So that's why we celebrate. This is why we celebrate Juneteenth on June the 19th, even though that the proclamation went into effect on January 1st. So we do it for those last bit of slaves that were not freed in Texas. So yeah, that's why we celebrate it. I wanted to bring it to you guys' attention, and also just the story, because like I said, the story was trending. Reggie Jackson's story was trending all over ESPN. It's all over the news. I saw it going super viral on TikTok, and it actually touched me. And it reminded me that, okay, wait a minute. Even though I do cover primarily just like news stories and movie news stories and those topics, I'm still a black woman. I'll never let myself, forget that. And I do come from a very long line. Once it's traced back to slavery, and my father's side, they were slaves in Tennessee, out in Tennessee, in Covington, and in Memphis, in Tennessee, but then that side. And at my mother's side, they were slaves back in Barbados. Because I believe my family members, they're still, I'm sure they're cousins, but they're still out in St. Thomas. So, but that's where my tracings, my legacies come from. Then my mother's, her mother's side, they came from Texas, and that's also like a connection too. So yeah, it's Texas, it's Barbados, and it's Tennessee. But it's all slavery, all slave ties. But me being the child post-slavery, coming from that, generations afterwards, I still like to remember where I came from, what my people endured. And it's always good just to bring certain things to light so people can firstly just understand the pain of different people's stories on this planet. And like I said before, the only way we as a civilization, we're going to change and grow and improve is if we always remember the past and we study it. I said it's like the most important thing that children should learn in school should be history. It's the most important thing. We should know our history. We should know where we came from. And we should know the truth. Not something watered down, but we should know the truth and the true impact and the horror, especially of slavery and Jim Crow and what African Americans went through, enduring through the South, and what African Americans went through until, I would say until recently, because racism is still very much alive, but I believe now we're hitting a point where millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, we can all come together, and as this new generation, we're more collectively in agreement that those old ways and that mindset is toxic, and we don't want that anymore. But yeah, it's always good to talk about those things. But yeah, tell me your thoughts down below. Did you celebrate Juneteenth? The only thing I did, unfortunately, I had to go to work. I was a little bit pissed off about that. But I did go to I went to a West Indian restaurant down, I believe it was in Upland. It was in Upland, but it was really good food. And I always tell myself, I'm like, okay, my family, my mother's side, they're from Barbados. So I always want to make sure I have a little sting and little root from the Bajan culture. And I always like to try West Indian food. So I did that. I tried some West Indian food. The chicken be fire. the chicken be fire. The people who were working in there were popping. They had the accent too. So I love that little little Bajan accent. Everyone in there sounded like Rihanna to me. So it was really cool, kind of being in that environment and being around people who are my people essentially. So doing that. So I did do that. Then what is it? Today's Friday, so I'll probably just throw in a movie or something. There was a movie one of my coworkers was telling me about it. I think it's called The Green Notebook or something. Actually, let me look it up. The Green Book. There we go. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, I think it's called The Green Book. Yeah, so it's the Negro Motorist Green Book. And it was a movie, right? But the movie is based off of this black guy who would essentially go across the country and find establishments where African Americans could go and dine and eat and stay in hotels without being pursued or killed, because that's just what it is. So it was like a safe haven for black people, or like, you know, just at least places black people could actually stay across the country. But yeah, I wanted to watch that book. I heard really great things about it, so I'll probably do that tonight with my mom. Me and her will sit down and go watch it, and we'll have a field day and we'll talk about it. But yeah, tell me down below, what are you gonna go do to celebrate Juneteenth? I know it passed, but you can still celebrate it this weekend. Or what did you do to celebrate Juneteenth? How do you feel about Reggie Jackson's story? Because it touched me. And looking at Reggie Jackson's face and watching him remember those moments, because the memories never go anywhere. They stick with you for a lifetime. But watching him remember the horrors of his past, that was, it was touching. It was horrifying, of course, but it was touching, and it was chilling because, like I said, it did not happen so long ago. But yeah, tell me your thoughts about Reggie Jackson down below, okay? But yeah, stay positive in the comment section, and I appreciate you guys so much just for staying with me and following and liking and just growing this channel. And I'm going to continue putting out good content and posting stories that I like and sharing things and gathering information. And yeah, I truly do. I appreciate you guys for everything, truly from the bottom of my heart, because this is just so cool. I get to be on YouTube. I'm so humbled by the experience. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. But yeah, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And other than that, like, have a beautiful day, have a wonderful weekend, and go do something for Juneteenth. Go to an African American museum, go read a book about African American history, go watch a good movie like I'm about to go do. There's so many movies about the struggle that African Americans went through, or even about slavery. But, you know, just have a moment where you can go study and learn and just have the reminder. Even if you're interested in Juneteenth, you can go like study it. But yeah, go have a learning week and go read and get some sun, get some water, get some apple cider like lemonade like I'm drinking. This is so fire. Right, and just be a great person out there. But other than that, you guys have a wonderful day.